Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Legend of the Black Mecca, Politics and Class in the Making of Modern Atlanta, by Maurice J. Hobson, narrated by Bill Andrew Quinn. Introduction. On September 18, 1990, the International Olympic Committee selected Atlanta, Georgia as the host city for the 26th Centennial Olympiad, 1996. A product of the visionary leadership of black mayors Maynard Jackson Jr. and Andrew Jackson Young, this achievement signaled a kairos moment for the southern city. Only 25 years before, Atlanta had reeled from urban rebellions as poor black citizens took to the streets to air their grievances over police brutality and poor living conditions. Just a few years later, Maynard Jackson had ascended to the mayor's office, drawing from an unprecedented coalition of black Atlantans and the city's white progressive voters. If a cross-racial grassroots coalition had been responsible for electing Jackson in 1973, the Olympic victory came thanks to a coalition of elites. Cooperation between the black city government and the white business elite, especially Coca-Cola and Delta Airlines, was instrumental to securing the games. The city's boosters, the Atlanta Convention Bureau, and different trade and tourist administrations could now claim that Atlanta had outgrown its status as regional capital of the South, transcending the region and history. After decades of reinvention, it was Hotlanta, the Deep South's newest and most modern world-class and international city. Yet the fruits of the success were not, and have never been, shared equitably. As much as Atlanta had changed, the same poor blacks who had taken to the streets in the urban uprisings of the 1960s had benefited little during the decades that followed. A divide between black elite and the black poor had always riven Atlanta's social fabric. Even after the city government shifted from white to black hands, its leaders pursued policies that benefited white and black elites to the exclusion of the vast majority of the black citizens who had brought them to power. The legend of the Black Mecca examines these contradictions as they emerged and deepened over the course of Atlanta's history in this period. It shows how elected and appointed black political kingmakers capitalized on the support of the broader black electorate to rise to power, only to play politics diverting resources, policies, and attention away from the rank and file of black Atlanta and toward a new political machine. It describes the origin of the class schism within Atlanta and the creation of a black educated and business elite emerging out of the black institutions of higher learning. After hard-fought struggle and the subsequent political gains from the passage of civil rights legislation such as the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, it seemed as if the prospect of equality for blacks was now plausible, yet the narrative traces the deepening of this divide during the tenures of the city's black mayors in politicking with the white business elite. The book concludes with an account of the disempowerment of the black poor during the Olympification of the city as a result of the Centennial Olympiad, and the concurrent rise of a social critique voiced by Atlanta and organized noises Outcast and Goody Mob. Atlanta's story is not unique. Though the city stands out because of its highly visible and highly educated black business and political class, the city's development over recent decades demonstrates the seismic shifts characteristic of the urban experiences of blacks throughout the American South. Atlanta's history and development encompass trends and tensions embedded in race, class, and politics of the South as a whole that have proved consistent from emancipation to the present. Therefore, Atlanta's story is rife with themes reflecting the chasmic fissures of class that afflict a broad array of black American communities. Atlanta's 20th Century Course foregrounds issues centered on African American class formation and stratification, suggesting questions that have been rarely posed and seldom answered. As much as class divisions in the present may plague Atlanta, its appeal has long been as a city that offered opportunity to all. After the Civil War, the moniker Black Mecca emerged as a descriptor for the city as large numbers of Southern blacks and white Northern missionaries migrated to Atlanta for divergent yet inextricably linked goals. During and after the Civil War, the city was occupied by Union troops and it housed the district headquarters for the Freedmen's Bureau, which aided blacks despite their previous status as slave or free. Blacks migrated to Atlanta seeking work and a better life that had been available before emancipation, as the Bureau served to aid blacks not only with sustenance but also with legal protection, though short-lived. With large numbers of blacks migrating to the city after the Civil War, Atlanta's blacks asserted themselves by building institutions that promoted autonomy and buttressed the black Mecca. At the turn of the 20th century, Atlanta was home to 4 black colleges, 1 black university, and 1 black seminary center. This cluster of institutions of higher education had no parallel in the rest of the United States or the world, and played a critical role in establishing and maintaining Atlanta's thriving black upper and middle classes. Yet these institutions also created a nepotistic and exclusive black caste and class system that greatly influenced the city's politics. The expectation of blacks in the South after the Civil War embodied the American dream, where Atlanta served as a situation to achieve a better quality of life than under pre-emancipation slave labor in 2 distinct ways. First, the opportunity of Atlanta afforded newly freed blacks who migrated from rural settings in the South to work in the textile mills and earn wages that enabled them to achieve a better quality of life than was possible under the pre-emancipation servitude of slave labor conditions. Simultaneously, black folks seeking education came to Atlanta, educated themselves, and formed thriving black upper and middle classes. Both of these groups are inextricably linked insofar as some could join the elite through hard work and success, and others looked to providing an opportunity for future black generations to thrive through the sacrifice of hard work and a moral upbringing. Prior to the classical phase of the civil rights movement, Atlanta's black elite urged moderation and incrementalism in race relations. This can be seen through Atlanta's style of biracial negotiation, as seen through the Atlanta Negro Voters League's success in striking down the all-white Georgia primary in 1946 with racemen John Wesley Dobbs and A.T. Walden at the helm. Atlanta's own Martin Luther King Jr., who became synonymous with the classical civil rights movement, emerged from Atlanta's black upper-middle class. However, the election of Maynard Jackson, a Morehouse graduate, as vice mayor in 1969 and as the city's first black mayor in 1973, was a signal moment in Southern black political empowerment and electoral politics. Jackson's ascension embodied the rise of the city's black educational elite to new heights of political power. The legend of Atlanta as a black Mecca had gained new meaning. After waiting in the wings and biding their time for decades, now the black-educated elite would rule. Yet this did not mean that the needs of the larger black community would be addressed. After an initial period of discomfort, as white business elites grew accustomed to the idea of a black city government and began to peg their support for candidates to whether their policies would promote higher profits and business-friendly politics, black political empowerment became intricately linked with white business. Racial pride overcame attention to issues of class, and voters continued to elect scions of the black education, business, and political elite. Yet the black masses on the fringes of these friendly politics perceived them as an eccentric form of democracy that truly amounted to little more than a white business venture in blackface. However, this was not entirely accurate, and the tensions described in this manuscript rest on this friction within Atlanta's black communities. By the late 20th century, Atlanta had won praise from national onlookers for the relatively benign state of race relations among city dwellers. The mid to late 1960s welcomed 3 sports franchises. In 1969, a 34-page spread on Atlanta in National Geographic stated that golden prosperity is upon the city. New jobs created since 1961 numbered nearly 160,000 for a gain of 43%, a sharper climb than any other major U.S. metropolitan area. In 1966, Atlanta had the lowest unemployment ratio in the country at 1.9%. The city led all other metropolitan areas in percentage gains in wholesale transactions, and in 5 years, it moved up in housing starts from 21st in the country to 8th. Of the country's 500 biggest industrial corporations, 400 maintained operations in Atlanta. The fact that 130 delegations from other cities and states visited Atlanta to study its development was evidence in itself of an excellent national image in 1969. The city projected an image of cooperation, but it came at a cost. The black upper and middle class caste maintained power in politicking with the white business elite, which, by default, further marginalized the city's black working and poor communities. Examples of this can be vividly seen in episodes such as the Atlanta sanitation strikes of 1977 and the Atlanta child murders, which purportedly took place from 1979 to 1982. So it is that Atlanta represents the highest educational, political, and economic aspirations and achievements of blacks over the past century, yet bears witness to some of the most discontented and deprived circumstances for blacks in the South and the country. Better than perhaps any other city, Atlanta provides a platform for viewing these interactions between diverse black populations within an urban New South environment. This outcome was, in fact, set in motion years before by an earlier generation of elites. In the 1940s and 1950s, the black upper and middle classes, along with Atlanta's powerful white business elite, initiated a plan of action for the commercial branding of the city, in particular, and the American South in general. According to Virginia Hine, the Forward Atlanta Plan, a business plan conceived by business people for the business community, was at the center of Atlanta's stellar image. Atlanta became one of the most well-advertised cities in the country with new construction, a cultural boom, and professional sports. Forward Atlanta crowned Atlanta as an impressive and progressive center in the areas of economic, political, and social practices in terms of race as the city too busy to hate. When juxtaposed with the recalcitrant Southern racism in comparable Southern urban areas such as Birmingham, Charlotte, Dallas, Greensboro, Jackson, Houston, Little Rock, Memphis, Montgomery, and New Orleans, Atlanta does indeed seem unique and forward-looking in the latter half of the 20th century, but the majority of Atlanta's black communities remained impoverished and experienced some of the harshest socio-economic conditions in urban America. Symbolically, Atlanta's hosting of the Centennial Olympiad represents a pivotal moment in the city's history. The Black Mecca's own politicians and professionals stood at the center of one of the modern American South's greatest achievements. In a region marked by a history of sordid relationships in terms of racism and oppression, it seemed as if blacks had awakened from the nightmare of Jim Crow into the dream of urban prosperity and international approbation. The Centennial Olympic Games and the recalculated steps that were necessary to book them provide a view into how extensively invested local and international blacks were in Atlanta, the Black Mecca's success on an international stage. In the end, the white business elites benefited from the city's rise to Olympic host city and the ensuing development and investment. At the same time, the black working classes and poor remained in dire straits that were as bad as or worse than anything they had experienced before. The city was mired in a series of controversial practices that led to the maltreatment of the city's poor and ran counter to the image being seared into the world's collective consciousness. The city's large poor and homeless black populations were stricken by laws and policies designed to purge the city of undesirables. Clearly, Atlanta's new preeminence could only be won by studiously neglecting the intra-racial class conflict that had been at the crux of the city's problems since the beginning of the 20th century. This will not be the first work to highlight Atlanta's dual identity and the tale of two cities of how Atlanta rose to be the American South's crown jewel, rewarding its elite while punishing its poor. W.E.B. Du Bois pilloried the city's black community in his classic book of essays, The Souls of Black Folk, stating, "If Atlanta be not named for Atalanta, she ought to have been." Du Bois explains how greed, capitalism, and materialism were the utmost nemesis of black America as a whole and of Atlanta's black community in particular. The legend of the Black Mecca targets audiences whose discourse has privileged the notoriety of Atlanta's white business elite and black and upper middle classes by neglecting to demystify their greatest asset, boosterism. By interrogating the city's working and poor classes to explicate and analyze the trends and tensions of Atlanta's transition from regional to world-class status, a central theme of this book complicates Atlanta's Black Mecca status. Books such as David Shoquist's The Atlanta Paradox and Clarence Stone's Regime Politics Governing Atlanta contribute to this milieu. Yet Allison Dorsey's To Build Our Lives Together, Community Formation in Black Atlanta, 1875 through 1906, poignantly describes how the Atlanta race riot in September 1906 foreshadows the class fault lines that exist in the 1980s and 1990s. Much like Dorsey's work, this manuscript suggests that the black middle class relied on the black working classes to emerge as power brokers and kingmakers, and draws readers to the dramatic tensions and trends in the ways that class has historically functioned and shifted in Black Atlanta. The legend of the Black Mecca traces the rise of the black elite and the bargains they made for prosperity, telling the story of the city's transition, while keeping Atlanta's poor and working-class communities at its center. Unconventional methods and analyses shift the focus toward underexplored aspects of Atlanta's history, such as the city's informal economy, through oral interviews of working and poor blacks as well as the black elite. The rise of hip-hop culture also gives voice to a sobering counter-narrative of Atlanta's evolution. The Dirty South hip-hop movement arose out of the legacy of Atlanta's music and culture fostered under black rule, and selected its subject matter from the daily lives of the black poor who suffered under the same rule from the late 1970s to the mid-1990s. Artists like Atlanta's own Outkast and Goody Mob expressly rejected the Black Mecca and Olympic City imagery, instead portraying the experience of the working and poorer classes in Atlanta's black ghettos. The music and lyrics of these artists demonstrate inherent tensions within Atlanta's black community as the city rose to new and unprecedented levels of prestige and status, and created a black nouveau riche steeped in Atlanta's black popular culture that not only shook the foundations of the existing elite, but also became, in its own way, resistant to those who aspired to join. In the lyrics, storytelling, and voices of protest of the Dirty South hip-hop movement, segments of the black working and poorer classes believed that the Black Mecca image bolstered by mayors Maynard Jackson and Andrew Young and the facelift of the city occurred at the expense of ordinary working and poor people, who were frequently criminalized, segregated, and divided along class lines. The Dirty South hip-hop movement provides a crucial lens for contrasting the sensibilities of the black upper and middle classes compared to the black working and poor classes regarding Atlanta's emergence into a modern black Mecca and international city. The legend of the Black Mecca is a critical response to current trends and tensions in the scholarly literature of the new African-American urban history. Since the mid-1990s, historians have sought to explain the factors that catapulted Atlanta to its status as the capital of the New South. Until recently, most historians have focused on the city's black upper and middle classes and their role in creating the Black Mecca image and pushing Atlanta toward world-class status through their relationship with the city's white business elite. Notable examples of this tradition include Alton Hornsby's Black Power in Dixie, A Political History of African Americans in Atlanta, 2009, which gives a synopsis of black political ascendancy within the city. Frederick Allen's Atlanta Rising, The Invention of an International City, 1946 through 1996, and Larry Keating's Atlanta, Race, Class, and Urban Expansion, 2001, focus on Atlanta's metamorphosis into the American South's crown jewel. Though these scholarly works showcase Atlanta's ability to brand itself as a city that transcended the stigmas of the American South, very little scholarship explores the influence of on-the-ground politics, urban expansion, and globalization on the city's black communities. This book investigates and analyzes the effect of Atlanta's international status on the city's working and poor classes of the black communities. Through literature surrounding black urban southern landscapes in the post-civil rights era, this story shows Atlanta's uniqueness and predictability simultaneously. Through archival records, interviews, analysis of pop cultural sources, and qualitative textual analyses supported by quantitative methods such as mapping and demography. This book will tell a history essential to understanding Atlanta's transition from regional to world-class city, while fashioning itself as a black Mecca for the African diaspora and commercially branding itself as the most progressive city in the American South. The social history of Atlanta reveals a distinctly different picture. Grappling with the historiography of the new African-American urban history and American civil rights, Black Power, Black Freedom movement, while simultaneously reckoning with the rise of neoliberalism, the legend of the Black Mecca tells an intra-racial narrative history of Atlanta that details Black political and class tensions in the modern urban South. The book consists of 7 chapters in addition to an introduction and afterword. Chapter 1 starts with a brief and concise history of Atlanta after the Civil War and the events that influenced the development of post-1965 Black Atlanta. A focus on Black education is necessary to better understand Black life in Atlanta and how the Black Mecca image came to be. Through education, we see how Black political kingmakers emerging out of Atlanta's Black upper class began to take shape. Chapter 1 concludes by examining the Kerner Report, a report commissioned by President Lyndon B. Johnson and overseen by Illinois Governor Otto Kerner, which concluded that America was segregated into 2 societies, one black, one white, moving in opposite directions. However, the chapter challenges this by observing Atlanta and noting that there were numerous Black American communities within Atlanta's Black society, those that bolstered the image of a Mecca and those that did not. Having thus outlined the relationship between Black education and geopolitical, social, cultural, and economic factors, Chapter 2 focuses on the emergence of a feisty Black lawyer named Maynard Jackson, Jr., who became Atlanta's first Black vice mayor and subsequently Atlanta's first Black mayor. Jackson's mayoral tenure, the first of its kind in Black big city leadership, bolstered the Black Mecca image. Jackson's emergence was the fruition of caste and class within Black Atlanta. He was a 5th-generation Georgian, born into 2 of Atlanta's prominent Black families. His paternal and maternal grandfathers were Andrew Jackson and John Wesley Dobbs, respectively. Jackson graduated from Morehouse College at age 18 and went on to receive legal training in Durham, North Carolina at North Carolina Central College, now University. He cut his teeth as a champion of the people and made headlines as the people's politician with his quixotic 1968 run for the United States Senate against Senator Herman Talmadge. Jackson's first term as mayor, 1973 through 77, of Atlanta was full of political success. However, during his second term, 1977 through 81, many among his working class and poor Black constituency felt that he had sacrificed them to play politics. Chapter 3 focuses on the tumultuous episode during which Atlanta's most vulnerable citizens, primarily poor Black children, were hunted and murdered. To illustrate this, the chapter explores the experience of the victims' families in oral interviews, FBI papers, and archival research to reveal how the popular political sentiment of Atlanta's Black working classes and poor toward Atlanta's Black City Hall was one of distrust, which thwarts the Black Mecca image. The Atlanta child murders provide a unique counter-narrative on class to Atlanta's Black Mecca status, as poor Black male youth victims were labeled and dismissed as hustlers and runaways, in effect suggesting that they deserved what happened to them. Chapter 3 accounts for the experiences of the Committee to Stop Children's Murder, STOP Committee, and the Techwood Bat Patrol, organizations formed by some of Atlanta's Black working class and poor who deemed it necessary to organize against the murderers because they believed that Jackson was too busy bolstering the Black Mecca image while sacrificing Atlanta's poor to play politics. The chapter grapples with the idea that at this time, Atlanta's Black political leadership was already working with Atlanta's white business elite to host the 1988 Democratic National Convention and the 1996 Olympic Games. As a result, It was widely believed by a large segment of the public that Atlanta's Black City administration downplayed the murders to show that social and economic progress had been made in the South, and thus to promote a city too busy to hate. Just as important, many in Black Atlanta felt that Wayne Williams, the lone suspect and subsequent convicted, was not the killer, and that another killer remained on the loose. The next two chapters focus on Andrew Young's political career, its implications for and influence on Atlanta as a global and national Black Mecca, although Young failed most of Black Atlanta's populace. On the world stage, Chapter 4 focuses on Atlanta's rise as a global Black city and the idea of Black global citizenship through foreign and domestic policies, as seen through U.S. presidents, from John F. Kennedy to Jimmy Carter. When Andrew Young was elected as the city's second Black mayor during the 1980s, he inherited numerous social ills and a pernicious financial crisis. When President Ronald Reagan cut federal funding to American cities, Young found it necessary to fund and expand the city through foreign investments and neoliberal forms of urban renewal and gentrification. Atlanta's white business elite saw these neoliberal tactics as selling the city to the Japanese, while most of Atlanta's Black communities saw a business-minded, globe-trotting mayor promoting purported progress and the Black Mecca image. Yet Young had no plan to deal with issues pertinent to the poor as mayor, and his citizen-of-the-world persona was not a good look for Atlanta's working-class and poor Black communities, as it seemed that he did not embody their interests. Young used his savoir-faire and political influence to refashion a city worthy of hosting the 1988 Democratic National Convention and the Centennial Olympiad. The Democratic National Convention served as the dress rehearsal for the Centennial Olympiad, and it made clear that Atlanta was indeed a new city with the Black Mecca image at its center, worthy of hosting events on the world stage. However, Atlanta's overwhelmingly poor and Black citizens did not share this vision of their city, nor were they at the center of the commercial branding of the American South. The significance of this is that, once again, the issue of class within the Black community presents itself as more divisive than cohesive. Chapter 5 focuses on the calculated and concerted steps taken by Atlanta's white business elite and Black city government to bid for the Centennial Olympic Games. A diverse cohort of private interests generated the necessary funds to give Atlanta a competitive bid for the Games. This cohort included officers of Atlanta's Fortune 500 companies, including the Coca-Cola Company and Delta Airlines, Atlanta businessman Billy Payne, and the politicians, mayors Maynard Jackson and Andrew Young. Once awarded the Centennial Games, two movements of paramount importance commenced, representing what the author calls the Olympification of Atlanta. Olympification describes the policies implementing urban renewal and gentrification to get Atlanta ready for the Games. The first of these movements, a joint effort of the United States Olympic Committee, USOC, and the Atlanta Organizing Committee, AOC, working to prepare the city for the Games, is extremely important. The second movement, the Atlanta Project, implemented social change in Atlanta by waging war against poverty within the city. Started by the former U.S. President, humanitarian and Georgia native Jimmy Carter, the project was well-intentioned, but in the end, it did very little for Atlanta's poor, thus further excluding them from the popular image of Atlanta as the Black Mecca. With Atlanta having achieved its long-sought world-class status, Chapter 6 focuses on Mayor Maynard Jackson's creation of the City of Atlanta's Bureau of Cultural Affairs, the first institution within city government that was dedicated to the support of artists, their creative expression, and arts organizations. The goal of the Bureau was to make all forms of art, established and experimental, more accessible by Atlanta's citizens. The Bureau empowered a multitude of artists and arts organizations through city-funded grants and broke new ground in creating a niche for Black musical genres such as jazz and classical music as well as alternative films. This set the stage for Atlanta to boom in terms of Black popular culture, as Jackson's Black political power yielded an expressive arm, a Black arts movement unique to Atlanta, making it ripe for popular culture to be disseminated and assessed critically. Dirty South rap music evolved out of this black arts movement and opened Black Atlanta to social commentary from a new generation of artists who lived in the underbelly, trampled over by Atlanta's pursuit of a global commercial center. This counter-narrative and demonstration gave a Southern perspective on popular culture in the city. It was grounded in hip-hop and centered on this particular sector of youth culture, the meaning and significance of a recently self-defined Southern style of rap and hip-hop culture that was established and promoted by Organized Noises, Outkast, and Goody Mob, rap groups hailing from Atlanta's southwest side. Their music embodied an aesthetic that was particular to the South in general and Atlanta in particular, but was consumed by markets nation.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?